Gampopa's 28 Categories of Yogic Precepts. The 10 Causes of Regret. Having obtained the difficult-to-obtain, free and endowed human body, it'd be a cause of regret to fritter life away. Having obtained this pure and difficult-to-obtain, free and endowed human body, it'd be a cause of regret to die an irreligious and worldly man. This life in the Kali Yuga, being so brief and uncertain, it'd be a cause of regret to spend it in worldly aims and pursuits. One's own mind, being the nature of Dharmakaya, uncreated, it'd be a cause of regret to let it be swallowed up in the morass of the world's illusions. The Holy Guru, being the guide on the path, it'd be a cause of regret to be separated from him before obtaining enlightenment. Religious faith and vows, being the vessel which conveys one to emancipation, it'd be a cause of regret were they to be shattered by the force of uncontrolled passions. The perfect wisdom having been found within oneself in virtue of the Guru's grace, it'd be a cause of regret to dissipate it amidst the jungle of worldliness. To sell, like so much merchandise, the sublime doctrine of the sages would be a cause of regret. Inasmuch as all beings are our kindly parents, it would be a cause of regret to have aversion for and thus disown or abandon any of them. The prime of youth being the period of development of the body, speech, and mind, it would be a cause of regret to waste it in vulgar indifference. These are the 10 causes of regret. The 10 requirements. Having estimated one's own capabilities, one requires a sure line of action. To carry out the commands of a religious preceptor, one requires confidence and diligence. To avoid errors in choosing a guru, the disciple requires knowledge of his own faults and virtues. Keenness of intellect and unwavering faith are required to tune in with the mind of the spiritual preceptor. Unceasing watchfulness and mental alertness, graced with humility, are required to keep the body, speech, and mind unsullied by evil. Spiritual armor and strength of intellect are required for the fulfillment of one's heart's vows. Habitual freedom from desire and attachment is necessary if one would be free from bondage. To acquire the twofold merit, born of right motives, right actions, and the altruistic dedication of their results, there is need of unceasing effort. The mind imbued with love and compassion in thought and deed ought ever to be directed to the service of all sentient beings. Through hearing, understanding, and wisdom, one should so comprehend the nature of all things as to not fall into the error of regarding matter and phenomena as real. These are the 10 requirements. The 10 things to be done. Attach yourself to a spiritual preceptor, endowed with spiritual power and complete knowledge. Seek a delightful solitude, endowed with psychic influences as a hermitage. Seek friends who have beliefs and habits like thine own, and in whom you can place your trust. Keeping in mind the evils of gluttony, use just enough food to keep you fit during the period of your retreats. Study the teachings of the great sages of all sects impartially. Study the beneficial sciences of medicine and astrology, and the profound arts of omens. Adopt such regimen and manner of living as will keep you in good health. Adopt such devotional practices as will conduce you to a spiritual development. Retain such disciples are as firm in faith, meek in spirit, and who appear to be favored by karma in their quest for divine wisdom. Constantly maintain alertness of consciousness in waking, walking, sitting, in eating, and in sleeping. These are the 10 things to be done. The 10 things to be avoided. Avoid a guru whose heart is set on acquiring worldly fame and possessions. Avoid friends and followers who are detrimental to your peace of mind and spiritual growth. Avoid hermitages and dharma centers and places of abode where there happen to be many persons who annoy and distract you. Avoid gaining your livelihood by means of deceit and theft. Avoid such actions as to harm your mind and impede your spiritual development. Avoid such acts of levity and thoughtlessness as to lower one in another's esteem. Avoid useless conduct and actions. Avoid concealing your own faults and speaking loudly of those of others. Avoid such food and habits as disagree with your health. Avoid such attachments that are inspired by avarice. These are the 10 things to be avoided. The 10 things not to be avoided. Ideas, being the radiance of the mind, are not to be avoided. Thought forms, being the revelry of reality, are not to be avoided. Obscuring passions, being the means of reminding one of divine wisdom, which gives deliverance from them, are not to be avoided, if rightly used to enable one to taste life to the fullness and thereby reach disillusionment. Affluence, being the manure and water for spiritual growth, is not to be avoided. Illness and tribulations, being teachers of piety, are not to be avoided. Enemies and misfortune, being the means of inclining one to a religious career, are not to be avoided. That which comes of itself, being a divine gift, is not to be avoided. Such devotional exercises of body and mind as one is capable of performing are not to be avoided. The thought of helping others, howsoever limited one's ability to help others may be, is not to be avoided. These are the 10 things not to be avoided. The 10 things one must know. One must know that all visible phenomena, being illusory, are unreal. One must know that the mind, being without independent existence, is impermanent. One must know that ideas arise from the concatenation of causes. One must know that the body and speech, being compounded of the 4 elements, are transitory. One must know that the effects of past actions, whence comes all sorrows, are inevitable. One must know that sorrow, being the means of convincing one of the need of the religious life, is a guru. One must know that attachment to worldly things makes material prosperity inimical to spiritual progress. One must know that misfortune, being the means of leading one to the doctrine, is also a guru. One must know that no existing thing has an independent existence. One must know that all things are independent. These are the 10 things one must know. The 10 things to be practiced. One should acquire practical knowledge of the path by treading it, and not be as are the multitude who profess but do not practice religion. By quitting one's own country and dwelling in foreign lands, one should acquire knowledge of non-attachment. Having chosen a religious preceptor, separate yourself from egotism and follow their teaching implicitly. Having acquired practical knowledge of spiritual things and made the great renunciation, permit not the body, speech, or mind to become unruly, but observe the 3 vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. Having resolved to attain the highest good, abandon selfishness and devote yourself to the service of others. Having entered upon the mystic mantraionic pathway, permit not the body, speech, or the mind to remain unsanctified, but practice the 3-fold mandala. During the period of youth, frequent not those who cannot direct thee spiritually, but acquire practical knowledge painstakingly at the feet of learned and pious gurus. These are the 10 things to be practiced. The 10 things to be persevered in. Novices should persevere in listening to and meditating upon religious teachings. Having had a spiritual experience, persevere in meditation and mental concentration. Persevere in solitude until the mind had been yogically disciplined. Should thought processes be difficult to control, persevere in your efforts to dominate them. Should there be great drowsiness, persevere in your effort to invigorate the intellect and control the mind. Persevere in meditation until you attain the imperturbable mental tranquility of samadhi. Having attained this state of samadhi, persevere in prolonging its duration and then causing its reoccurrence at will. Should various misfortunes assail you, persevere in patience of body, speech, and mind. Should there be great attachment, hankering, or mental weakness, persevere in an effort to eradicate it as soon as possible. Should benevolence and pity be weak in you, persevere in directing the mind towards perfection. These are the 10 things to be persevered in. Boo. The 10 incentives. By reflecting upon the difficulty of obtaining a free and endowed human body, mayest thou be incited to adopt the religious career. By reflecting upon death and the impermanence of life, mayest thou be incited to live piously. By reflecting upon the irrevocable nature of the results which inevitably arise from actions, mayest thou be incited to listen to and meditate upon the doctrine. By reflecting upon the difficulty of eradicating erroneous concepts, may you be incited to constant meditation which overcomes them. By reflecting upon the predominance of evil propensities in this Kali Yuga, may you be inclined to seek their antidote in the Dharma. By reflecting upon the multiplicity of misfortunes in this age of darkness, may you be inclined to persevere in the quest for emancipation. By reflecting upon the uselessness of aimlessly frittering away this life, may you be incited to diligence in the treading of the path. The 10 errors. Weakness of faith combined with strength of intellect are apt to lead to the error of talkativeness. Strength of faith combined with weakness of intellect are apt to lead to the error of narrow-minded dogmatism. Great zeal without adequate religious instruction is apt to lead to the error of going to wrong and erroneous extremes, or following misleading paths. Meditation without sufficient preparation, through having heard and pondered the doctrine, is apt to lead to the error of losing oneself in the darkness of unconsciousness. Without practical and adequate understanding of the doctrine, one is apt to fall into the error of religious self-conceit. Unless the mind be trained to selflessness and infinite compassion, one is apt to fall into the error of seeking liberation for self alone. Unless the mind be disciplined by knowledge of its own immaterial nature, one is apt to fall into the error of diverting all activities along the path of worldliness. Unless all worldly ambitions be eradicated, one is apt to fall into the error of allowing oneself to be dominated by worldly motifs. By permitting credulous and vulgar admirers to congregate about thee, there is a liability of falling into the error of becoming puffed up with worldly pride. By boasting of one's occult learning and powers, one is liable to fall into the error of proudly exhibiting proficiency in worldly rites. These are the 10 errors. The 10 resemblances where one may err. Desire may be mistaken for faith. Attachment may be mistaken for benevolence and compassion. Cessation of thought process may be mistaken for the quiescence of infinite mind, which is the true goal. Sense perception and phenomena may be mistaken for revelations or glimpses of reality. A mere glimpse of reality may be mistaken for complete realization. Those who outwardly profess but do not practice religion may be mistaken for a true devotee. Slaves of passion may be mistaken for masters of yoga who have liberated themselves from all conventional laws. Actions performed in the interest of self may be mistakenly regarded as altruistic. Deceptive methods may be mistakenly regarded as being prudent. Charlatans may be mistaken for sages. These are the 10 resemblances wherein one may err. The 10 things wherein one errs not. In being free from attachment to all objects, and being ordained into the holy order, forsaking home and entering upon the homeless state, one does not err. In revering one's spiritual preceptor, one does not err. In thoroughly studying the doctrine, hearing discourses thereon, and reflecting and meditating upon it, one does not err. In nourishing lofty aspirations and having a lowly demeanor, one does not err. In entertaining liberal views as to religion, and yet being firm in observing formal religious vows, one does not err. In having greatness of intellect and smallness of pride, one does not err. In being wealthy in religious doctrines and diligent in meditating upon them, one does not err. In having profound religious learning, combined with knowledge of things spiritual and absence of pride, one does not err. By passing one's whole life in solitude and meditation, one does not err. In being unselfishly devoted to doing good to others by means of wise methods, one does not err. These are the 10 things where one errs not. The 13 grievous failures. If, after having been born a human being, one gives no heed to the holy doctrine, one resembles a man who returns empty-handed from a land rich in precious gems, and this is a grievous failure. If after having entered the door of the holy order, one returns to the life of a common worldly person, one resembles a moth plunging into the flame of a lamp, and this is a grievous failure. To dwell with a sage and remain in ignorance is to be like a man dying of thirst on the shore of a lake, and this is a grievous failure. To know the moral precepts and not apply them to the cure of obscuring passions is to be like a diseased man carrying a bag of medicine which he never uses, and this is a grievous failure. To preach religion and not to practice it is to be like a parrot saying a prayer, and this is a grievous failure. The giving in alms and charity of things obtained by theft, robbery, or deceit is like lightning striking the surface of water, and that its effects is dissipated. This is a grievous failure. The offering to deities, the meat obtained by killing animate beings, is like offering a mother the flesh of her own child, and this is a grievous failure. To exercise patience for merely selfish ends rather than for doing good to others is to be like a cat exercising patience in order to kill a rat, and this is a grievous failure. Performing meritorious actions in order to merely attain fame and praise in this world is like bartering the mystic wish-granting gem for a pellet of goat dung, and this is a grievous failure. If after having heard much of the doctrine, one's mind still be unattuned, one is like a physician with a chronic disease, and this is a grievous failure. To be clever concerning the precepts, yet ignorant of the spiritual experiences which come from applying them, is to be like a rich man who hath lost the key of his treasury, and this is a grievous failure. To attempt to explain to others doctrines which one has not completely mastered oneself is to be like a blind man leading the blind, and this is a grievous failure. To hold experiences resulting for the first stages of meditation to be those of the final stage is to be like a man who mistakes brass for gold, and this is a grievous failure. These are the 13 grievous failures. The 15 weaknesses. A religious devotee shows weakness if he allows his mind to be obsessed with worldly thoughts while dwelling in solitude. A religious devotee who is the head of a spiritual community shows weakness if he seeks his own interests rather than those of the brotherhood. A religious devotee shows weakness if he be careful in the observances of moral disciplines and yet lacking in moral restraint. It shows weakness in one who has entered upon the righteous path to cling to worldly feelings of attraction and repulsion. It shows weakness in one who has renounced worldliness and entered the holy order to hanker after acquiring merit. It shows weakness in one who has caught a glimpse of reality to fail to persevere in sadhana or yogic meditation till the dawning of full enlightenment. It shows weakness in one who is a religious devotee to enter upon the path and then be unable to tread it. It shows weakness in one who has no other occupation than the religious devotion to be unable to eradicate from himself unworthy actions. It shows weakness in one who has chosen the religious career to have hesitancy in entering into close retreat while knowing full well that the food and everything needed would be provided unasked. A religious devotee who exhibits occult powers when practicing exorcism or driving away diseases shows weakness. A religious devotee shows weakness if he barters sacred truths for food, money, or rent. One who is vowed to the religious life shows weakness if he cunningly praises himself while disparaging others. A man of religion who preaches loftily to others and does not live loftily himself shows weakness. One who professes religion and is unable to live in solitude in his own company and yet knows not how to make himself agreeable to the company of others shows weakness. The religious devotee shows weakness if he be not indifferent to comfort and hardship. These are the 15 weaknesses. The 12 indispensable things. It is indispensable to have an intellect endowed with the power of comprehending and applying the doctrine to one's own needs. At the very beginning of one's religious career, it is indispensably necessary to have the most profound aversion for the interminable sequences of repeated deaths and births. A guru capable of guiding you on the path of emancipation is also indispensable. Diligence combined with fortitude and invulnerability to temptation are also indispensable. Unceasing perseverance in neutralizing the results of evil deeds by the performance of good deeds and the fulfilling of the threefold vow to maintain chastity of body, purity of mind, and control of speech are indispensable. A philosophy comprehensive enough to embrace the whole of knowledge is indispensable. A system of meditation which will produce the power of concentrating the mind upon anything whatsoever is indispensable. An art of living which will enable one to utilize each activity of body, speech, and mind as an aid on the path is indispensable. A method of practicing the select teachings which will make them more than mere words is indispensable. Special instructions by a wise teacher which will enable one to avoid misleading paths, temptations, pitfalls, and dangers are indispensable. Indomitable faith combined with supreme serenity of mind are indispensable at the moment of death. As a result of having practically applied the select teachings, the attainment of spiritual powers capable of transmuting the body, the speech, and the mind into the divine essence is indispensable. These are the 12 indispensable things. The 10 signs of a superior man. To have but little pride and envy is the sign of a superior man. To have but few desires and satisfaction with simple things is the sign of a superior man. To be lacking hypocrisy and deceit is the sign of a superior man. To regulate one's conduct in accordance with the law of cause and effect, as carefully as one guards the pupil of one's eye, is the sign of a superior man. To be faithful to one's engagements and obligations is the sign of a superior man. To be able to keep alive friendships, while one at the same time regards all beings with impartiality, is the sign of a superior man. To look with pity and without anger upon those who live evilly is the sign of a superior man. To allow unto others the victory, taking unto oneself the defeat, is the sign of a superior man. To differ from the multitude in every thought and action is the sign of a superior man. To observe faithfully and without pride one's vows of chastity, piety, is a sign of a superior man. These are the 10 signs of a superior man. Their opposites are the 10 signs of an inferior man. The 10 useless things. Our body being illusory and transitory, it is useless to give overmuch attention to it. Seeing that when we die, we must depart empty-handed, and on the morning after our death, our corpse is expelled from our own home, it is useless to labor and to suffer privations in order to make for ourselves a home in this world. Seeing that when we die, our descendants, if spiritually unenlightened, are unable to render us the least assistance, it is useless for us to bequeath to them worldly rather than spiritual riches, even out of love. Seeing that our descendants themselves are subject to death, and that whatever worldly goods we may bequeath to them are certain to be lost eventually, it is useless to make bequests of things in this world. Seeing that when we die, we must go on our own way alone and without kinsfolk or friends, it is useless to have devoted time, which ought to be dedicated to the winning of enlightenment, to their humoring and obliging, or in showing loving affection upon them. Seeing that when death comes, one must relinquish even one's own home, it is useless to devote life to the acquisition of worldly things. Seeing that unfaithfulness to the religious vows will result in one's going to the miserable states of existence, it is useless to have entered the religious order if one lived life not by a holy life. To have heard and thought about the doctrine and not practiced it, and acquired spiritual powers to assist thee at the moment of death, is useless. To have heard and thought about the doctrine, and not practiced it, and acquired spiritual powers to assist thee at the moment of death is useless. It is useless to have lived even for a very long time with a spiritual preceptor, if one be lacking in humility and devotion, and thus be unable to develop spiritually. seeing that all existence and apparent phenomenon are ever transient, changing and unstable, and more especially that the worldly life affords neither reality nor permanent gain, it is useless to have devoted oneself to the profitless doings of this world rather than seeking of the divine wisdoms and truths. These are the 10 useless things. The 10 self-imposed troubles. To enter the state of a householder without the means of sustenance produces self-imposed troubles, as does an idiot eating poison. To live a thoroughly evil life and disregard the doctrine produces self-imposed trouble, as does an insane person jumping over a precipice. To live a hypocritically life produces self-imposed troubles, as does a person who puts poison in his own food. To be lacking in firmness of mind and yet attempt to act as the head of a spiritual community produces self-imposed troubles, as does a feeble old woman who attempts to herd cattle. To devote oneself wholly to selfish ambitions and not strive for the good of others produces self-imposed trouble, as does a blind man who allows himself to become lost in the desert. To be absorbed in the pursuit of worldly things rather than in nourishing the growth of divine wisdom produces self-imposed trouble, as does an eagle when it breaks its wing. Shamelessly to misappropriate offerings which have been dedicated to the Guru or the Triple Gem produces self-imposed troubles, as does a child swallowing live hot coals. These are the 10 self-imposed troubles. The 10 things where one does good to oneself. One does good to oneself by abandoning worldly conventions and devoting oneself to the holy Dharma. One does good to oneself by departing from home and kindred and attaching oneself to a guru of saintly character. One does good to oneself by relinquishing worldly activities and devoting oneself to the 3 religious activities of hearing, reflecting, and meditating upon the chosen teachings. One does good to oneself by giving up social intercourse and dwelling alone in solitude. One does good to oneself by renouncing desire for luxury and ease and enduring hardships. One does good to oneself by being contented with simple things and free from craving for worldly possessions. One does good to oneself by making and firmly adhering to the resolution not to take advantage of others. One does good to oneself by attaining freedom from hankering after the transitory pleasures of this life and devoting oneself to the realization of the eternal bliss of nirvana. One does good to oneself by abandoning attachment to visible material things which are transitory and unreal, and attaining knowledge of reality. One does good to oneself by preventing the 3 doors to knowledge, the body, speech, and mind, from becoming spiritually undisciplined, and by acquiring, through right use of them, the 2-fold merit. These are the 10 things where one does good to oneself. The 10 best things. For one of little intellect, the best thing is to have faith in the law of cause and effect. For one of ordinary intellect, the best thing is to recognize both within and without oneself the workings of the law of opposites. For one of superior intellect, the best thing is to have a thorough comprehension of the inseparableness of the knower, the object, knowledge, and the act of knowing. For one of little intellect, the best meditation is complete concentration of mind upon a single object. For one of ordinary intellect, the best meditation is unbroken concentration of mind upon the two dualistic concepts of phenomena and noumena, and consciousness and mind. For one of superior intellect, the best meditation is to remain in mental quiescence, the mind devoid of all thought processes, knowing that the meditator... Oh, I'm sorry. I repeated myself. For one of little intellect, the best religious practice is to live in strict conformity with the law of cause and effect. For one of ordinary intellect, the best religious practice is to regard all objective things as though they were images seen in a dream or produced by magic. For one of superior intellect, the best religious practice is to abstain from all worldly desires and actions, regarding all samsaric things as though they were non-existent. For those of all three grades of intellect, the best indication of spiritual progress is the gradual diminution of obscuring passions and selfishness. These are the 10 best things. The 10 grievous mistakes. For a religious devotee to follow a hypocritical charlatan instead of a guru who sincerely practices the doctrine is a grievous mistake. For a religious devotee to apply himself to vain worldly sciences rather than seeking the chosen secret teachings of the great sages is a grievous mistake. For a religious devotee to make far-reaching plans as though he were going to establish permanent residence in this world, instead of living though each day were the last he had, is a grievous mistake. For a religious devotee to preach the doctrine to the multitude, and having realized it to be true, instead of meditating upon it and testing its truths in solitude, is a grievous mistake. For a religious devotee to be like a miser and hoard up riches instead of dedicating them to the religion and charity is a grievous mistake. For a religious devotee to give away in body, speech, and mind to the shamelessness of debauchery instead of observing carefully the vows of purity and chastity is a grievous mistake. For a religious devotee to spend his life between worldly hopes and fears instead of gaining understanding of reality is a grievous mistake. For a religious devotee to try to reform others instead of reforming himself is a grievous mistake. For a religious devotee to strive after worldly powers instead of cultivating his own innate spiritual powers is a grievous mistake. For a religious devotee to be idle and indifferent instead of persevering when all the circumstances favorable for spiritual development are present is a grievous mistake. These are the 10 grievous mistakes. The 10 necessary things. At the very outset of one's religious career, one should have so profound an aversion for the continuation, succession of deaths and births, to which all who have not attained enlightenment are subject, that one will wish to flee from it even as a stag flees from captivity. The next necessary thing is perseverance so great that one regrets not the losing of one's life in the quest for enlightenment, like that of a husbandman who tills his fields and regrets not that the tilling, even though he may die in the morning. The third necessary is joyfulness of mind, like that of a man who has accomplished a great deed of far-reaching influence. Again, one should comprehend that as a man dangerously wounded by an arrow, there is not a moment of time to be wasted. One needs ability to fix the mind on a single thought, even as does a mother who has lost her only son. Another necessary thing is to understand that there is no need of doing anything. Even as a cowherd whose cattle has been driven off by enemies understands he can do nothing to recover them. It is primarily requisite for one to hunger after the doctrine, even as a hungry man hungers after food. One needs to be as confident of one's mental ability as does a strong man of his ability to hold fast to a precious gem which he has found. One must expose the fallacy of dualism as one does the fallacy of a liar. One must have confidence in the thatness as being the sole refuge, even as an exhausted crow far from land has confidence in the mast of the ship upon which it rests. These are the 10 necessary things. The 10 unnecessary things. If the empty nature of the mind be realized, no longer is it necessary to listen to or meditate upon religious teachings. If the unsullied nature of the intellect be realized, no longer is it necessary to seek absolution of one's sins. Nor is absolution necessary for one who abides in the state of mental quiescence. For him who has attained the state of unalloyed purity, there is no need to meditate upon the path or upon the method of treading it, for he has arrived at the goal. If the unreal or illusory nature of cognition be realized, no need is there to meditate upon the state of non-cognition. If the non-reality or illusory nature of obscuring passions be realized, no need is there to seek their antidote. If all phenomenon be known to be illusory, no need is there to seek or reject anything. If sorrow and misfortune be recognized to be blessings, no need is there to seek happiness. If the unborn or uncreated nature of one's own consciousness be realized, no need is there to practice transference of consciousness. If only the good of others be sought in all that one does, no need is there to seek benefit for oneself. These are the 10 unnecessary things. The 10 more precious things. One free, well-endowed human life is more precious than myriads of non-human lives in any of the 6 states of existence. One wise man is more precious than multitudes of irreligious and worldly-minded people. One esoteric truth is more precious than innumerable exoteric doctrines. One momentary glimpse of divine wisdom, born of meditation, is more precious than any amount of knowledge derived from merely listening to and thinking about religious teachings. The smallest amount of merit dedicated to the good of others is more precious than any amount of merit dedicated to one's own good. To experience but momentarily the samadhi, wherein all thought processes are quiescent, is more precious than to experience uninterruptedly the samadhi, wherein thought processes are still present. To enjoy a single moment of nirvanic bliss is more precious than to to enjoy any amount of sensual bliss. The smallest good deed done unselfishly is more precious than innumerable good deeds done selfishly. The reincarnation of every worldly thing, the renunciation of every worldly thing, home, family, friends, property, fame, duration of life, and even health, is more precious than the giving of inconceivable vast worldly wealth and charity. One lifetime spent in the quest of enlightenment is more precious than all the lifetimes during an eon spent in worldly pursuits. These are the 10 most precious things. The 10 equal things. For him who is sincerely devoted to the religious life, it is the same whether he refrain from worldly activities or not. For him who has realized the transcendental nature of mind, it is the same whether he meditate or not. For him who is freed from attachment to worldly luxuries, it is the same whether he practices asceticism or not. For him who has realized reality, it is the same whether he dwell on an isolated hilltop in solitude or wander hither and thither as a bhiksu. For him who has attained the mastery of his mind, it is the same whether he partakes of the pleasures of the world or not. For him who is endowed with the fullness of compassion, it is the same whether he practices meditation in solitude or work for the good of others in the midst of society. For him who has humility and faith with respect to his guru and are unshakable, it is the same whether he dwells with his guru or not. For him who understands thoroughly the teachings which he had received, it is the same whether he meet with good fortune or bad fortune. For him who has given up the worldly life and taken the practice of the spiritual truths, it is the same whether he observes conventional codes of conduct or not. For him who has attained the sublime wisdom, it is the same whether he is able to exercise miraculous powers or not. These are the 10 equal things. The 10 virtues of the Holy Dharma. The fact that there have been made known among men the 10 pious acts, the 10 paramita, the various teachings concerning reality and perfection, the 4 noble truths, the 4 states of dhyana, the 4 states of formless existence, and the 2 mystic paths, the higher and the lower paths, show the virtue of the Holy Dharma. The fact that there have been evolved in the Sangha spiritually enlightened princes and Brahmins in this existence of samsara among men, and the 6 orders of devas of the sensuous paradises, the 17 orders of gods of the world of form, and the orders of gods of the world without form, shows the virtue of the Holy Dharma. The fact that there have arisen in the world those who have entered the stream, those who will return to birth but once more, those who have passed beyond the need of further birth, and arhats, and self-enlightened Buddhas and omniscient Buddhas, show the virtue of the Holy Dharma. The fact that there are those who have attained Bodic enlightenment and are able to return to the world as divine incarnations and work for the deliverance of mankind and of all living things till the time the dissolution of the physical universe shows the virtue of the holy Dharma. The fact that there exists, as an outcome of all-embracing benevolence of the bodhisattvas, protective spiritual influence, which make possible the deliverance of men and of all beings, shows the virtue of the holy Dharma. The fact that one experience, even in the unhappy worlds of existent moments of happiness, as a direct outcome of having performed little deeds of mercy, show in the human world, shows the virtue of the holy Dharma. The fact that men, after having lived evilly, should have renounced the worldly life and become saints, worthy of the veneration of the world, shows the virtue of the holy Dharma. The fact that men whose heavy evil karma would have condemned them to almost endless suffering after death should have turned to the religious life and attained nirvana, shows the virtue of the holy Dharma. The fact that by merely having faith in or meditating upon the doctrine, or by merely donning the robe of a bhikkhu, one becomes worthy of respect and veneration, shows the virtue of the holy Dharma. The fact that one, even after having abandoned all worldly possessions and embraced the religious life and given up the state of householder and hidden himself in the most secluded hermitage, should still be sought for and supplied with all the necessities of life, shows the virtue of the holy Dharma. These are the 10 virtues of the holy Dharma. The 10 figurative expressions. As the foundation truth cannot be described, but must be realized in samadhi, the expression foundation truth is merely figurative. As there is neither any traversing nor any traverser of the path, the expression path is merely figurative. As there is neither any seeing nor any seer of the true state, the expression true state is merely figurative. As there is neither any meditation nor any meditator of the pure state, the expression pure state is merely figurative. As there is neither any enjoying nor any enjoyer of the natural mood, the expression natural mood is merely figurative. As there is neither any accumulating nor any accumulator of merits, the expression twofold merits is merely figurative. As there is neither any performing nor any performer of actions, the expression twofold obscuration is merely figurative. As there is neither any renunciation nor any renuncer of worldly existence, the expression worldly existence is merely figurative. As there is neither any obtaining nor any obtainer of results of actions, the expression results of actions is merely figurative. These are the 10 figurative expressions. The 10 great joyful realizations. It is a great joy to realize that the mind of all sentient beings is inseparable from the all-mind. It is a great joy to realize that the fundamental reality is qualityless and that no characteristics can be applied to it. It is a great joy to realize that in the infinite, though transcending knowledge of reality, all samsaric differentiations are non-existent, or that all partial or relative truths are recognized as parts of the one truth. It is a great joy to realize that in the state of the primordial or uncreated mind, there exists no disturbing thought processes. It is great joy to realize that in the Dharmakaya, Where mind and matter are inseparable, there exists neither any holder of theories nor any support of theories. It is great joy to realize that in the self-emanated, compassionate, bliss body Sambhogakaya, there exists no birth, no death, transition, or any change. It is a great joy to realize that in the self-emanated, divine, transformative body, the Nirmanakaya, there exists no feeling of duality. It is a great joy to realize that in the Dharma chakra, there exists no support for the doctrine of a soul or personal immortality. It is a great joy to realize that in the divine, boundless compassion of the Bodhisattvas, there exists neither any shortcoming nor any showing of partiality. It is a great joy to realize that the path to freedom which all the Buddhas have trodden is ever existent, ever unchanged, and ever open to those who are ready to enter upon it. These are the 10 great joyful realizations. The conclusion. Here and above is contained the essence of the immaculate words of the great gurus, who were endowed with divine wisdom. Among these great teachers were the glorious Dipankara, the first great reformer of Lamaism, the spiritual father, and his successors, who were divinely appointed by the spreading of the doctrine in the northern land of the snow, the gracious gurus of the Kadampa school. There were also the king of the yogins, Milarepa, to whom was bequeathed the learning of the sage Marpa of Lobrak, and of others, and the illustrious saints Naropa and Matripa of the noble land of India, whose splendor equaled that of the sun and moon, and the disciples of all these. Here ends the supreme path, the Rosary of Precious Gems.